Welcome to a deep dive into the life and mind of Charles Darwin. He's arguably one of history's most influential figures in science. We're going to be using excerpts from his autobiography that you provided to understand the man behind the groundbreaking theories.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to explore that personal side of a scientific giant, right?
Mm.
Like Darwin.
Hmm.
And his autobiography offers a really unique window into his development as a scientist.
And what I find really interesting is how his early experiences, even some that you might consider insignificant, played a role in shaping his scientific journey. Like, for instance, Darwin mentions multiple times in his autobiography that he was never encouraged to practice dissection when he was studying medicine at Edinburgh University,
Mhm.
something that he later regretted.
Mm. And that aversion to dissection really had a direct impact on how Darwin ended up developing his theories. I mean,
Yeah.
he became a master of observation, meticulously recording even the smallest details because he wasn't dissecting specimens himself.
Yeah, it makes you think about how those missed opportunities or even challenges can kind of influence our paths in these unexpected ways. Speaking of early influences, Darwin's childhood seemed to be chock full of curiosity and a love for the natural world. His autobiography details a prank that he pulled as a child where he collected fruit from his father's trees and then hid it and pretended to have discovered a hidden hoard.
It's a great anecdote. It really reveals this playful side to Darwin, but it also hints at that early fascination with observation and deduction. Even as a child, he was drawn to collecting and categorizing,
Mm-hmm.
a passion that extended, beyond fruit to minerals, coins, shells. I mean, really anything that he could get his hands on.
It's like this, like he had this innate drive to gather and organize and make sense of the world around him, which is so evident in his meticulous scientific work later. This fascination with nature was further fueled by books like Gilbert White's The Natural History of Selborne, which he mentions in his autobiography.
And it wasn't just a passive interest. Darwin was actively engaged with nature.
Yeah.
A school friend even recalled how Darwin could identify a flower's name just by looking at its blossom, a skill that he had learned from his mother.
That is some impressive botanical knowledge. I can barely remember to water my plants. As much as young Charles seemed to love nature, he wasn't quite as enthusiastic about formal education, finding his time at Shrewsbury School, which solely focused on the classics, to be incredibly uninspiring.
Yeah. Yeah, that tracks with what we often see in great minds, right?
Mhm.
Formal schooling doesn't always resonate with that natural curiosity. Darwin himself actually called his time at Shrewsbury School simply a blank in his autobiography.
Wow, he certainly didn't mince words. It seems like his true education began outside the traditional classroom. His father, who was concerned about his lack of enthusiasm for this traditional path, decided to steer him towards medicine, sending him off to Edinburgh University with his brother. But, as we know, medicine wasn't Darwin's true calling.
Right. And it's almost comical when you consider Darwin's later work, because he absolutely loathed those medical lectures. He did, however, find chemistry to be quite interesting.
Ah, yes, chemistry. This is where he earns a rather memorable nickname. Uh, Gas. His chemistry experiments with his brother earned him that moniker, much to the dismay of his headmaster.
Right. His headmaster even went so far as to reprimand him for wasting time on chemistry. He deemed it a useless pursuit.
If only he knew. It's a reminder that the things we might initially dismiss as useless can sometimes lead us to our greatest passions and achievements.
And that's kind of where Darwin's path takes this unexpected turn, right? When medicine didn't work out, his father suggested the clergy, thought it might be a more suitable profession.
It does seem strange considering the theories that Darwin would later become so famous for, but it's true. He enrolled at Cambridge University with the intention of joining the clergy, and even found himself quite engrossed in those theological arguments of the time.
Yeah, he studied John Paley's um, evidences of Christianity and moral philosophy quite thoroughly. He even found Paley's logic as compelling as Euclid's geometric proofs.
He even went so far as to call studying Paley's work the most useful part of his academic journey at the time, which is fascinating considering, his later work.
It really highlights how grappling with those different schools of thought, even those that we might later move away from, can really shape our analytical abilities.
Hmm.
Like it seems like Paley's work, whether Darwin agreed with it or not, it really sharpened his own logical reasoning, a
Yeah.
skill that would prove incredibly valuable in his scientific endeavors.
It's true. Sometimes we learn the most from the ideas that we challenge, but Cambridge wasn't all theological debates for Darwin. He also found himself swept up in this beetle collecting frenzy during his time there.
Yeah, beetles, right? Beetles seem to hold this particular fascination for Darwin. Much like the barnacles that he had later dedicated years of his life to studying, Darwin even devised new methods for collecting these beetles, employing a laborer to help gather specimens. This dedication to collecting and meticulously cataloging, evident even in his youth, would really become a cornerstone of his later scientific process.
It speaks to his methodical nature and his endless curiosity. But perhaps the most significant development during his time at Cambridge was his friendship with Professor John Stevens Henslow, who was a botanist and geologist.
Professor Henslow became a mentor and a close friend to Darwin,
Mm.
ultimately shaping his destiny in ways I don't think either of them could have anticipated.
Darwin was particularly impressed by Henslow's ability to draw conclusions from these prolonged observations, a quality that clearly resonated with Darwin's own approach to scientific inquiry. And beyond just his scientific acumen, Henslow was, by all accounts, a very kind and decent man.
Yeah. There's a story Darwin recounts about rushing to Henslow, excited about a scientific discovery, only to have Henslow gently point out that it was already a well-known phenomenon.
Oh no, that's the worst. But it sounds like Henslow handled it gracefully.
He did. Instead of being dismissive, he took the time to explain the phenomenon and its significance to Darwin, nurturing his enthusiasm without crushing his spirit. It speaks volumes about Henslow's character.
He sounds like the ideal mentor. And it was through Henslow that Darwin received the opportunity that would change his life, an invitation to join the HMS Beagle as the ship's naturalist on a voyage around the world.
An opportunity that he almost missed out on, by the way, due to Captain Fitzroy's rather unusual selection criteria.
And this is where the story of Darwin's nose comes in. Fitzroy was a follower of Lavender, a physiognomist who believed he could judge a man's character by his facial features.
And Fitzroy wasn't convinced that Darwin's nose possessed the necessary character traits for such a demanding journey.
Can you imagine being judged on your nose? Thankfully, Fitzroy eventually relented and Darwin boarded the Beagle, marking the start of this incredible scientific adventure.
Yeah, the voyage of the Beagle was more than just a journey for Darwin. It was a crucible. It forged him into the scientist he was meant to be.
During those 5 years at sea, Darwin experienced this incredible diversity of the natural world firsthand. From the rainforests of Brazil to the desolate plains of Patagonia, the Galapagos Islands with their unique species, to the coral reefs of the Pacific.
And through it all, Darwin was meticulously observing, collecting, and questioning.
5 years at sea must have been quite the experience.
Absolutely. His father even remarked that Darwin's head had changed shape, which, while likely an exaggeration, speaks to the transformative nature of the voyage.
Back in England, Darwin began the daunting task of making sense of it all, right? Meticulously sorting through his extensive notes, collected specimens, and the multitude of ideas swirling in his mind.
Yeah. This is where his process truly resonates with the learner in all of us. He spent years gathering evidence, carefully analyzing his findings, and refining his ideas before he even considered presenting his theory to the world.
He was determined to let the facts guide him, to avoid any preconceived notions that might cloud his scientific judgment.
It was during this period of intense study that he began to connect the dots between the diversity of life he'd witnessed and the challenges those life forms faced in their struggle for survival.
And this is where Thomas Robert Malthus enters the picture. His essay on population growth, which argued that populations tend to increase faster than the resources available to sustain them, leading to competition for survival, wasn't exactly uplifting material.
But for Darwin, it was a revelation. He saw a clear link between Malthus's ideas and his own observations of variations within species. He realized that individuals with traits that gave them even a slight advantage in this struggle for existence would be more likely to survive, reproduce, and pass those advantageous traits on to their offspring.
So it's like nature's way of continually adapting and evolving.
Exactly. Darwin called this process natural selection, a simple yet elegant explanation for the diversity and complexity of life on Earth. But even with this groundbreaking theory taking shape, Darwin didn't rush to publish his findings. He was a meticulous scientist and spent years gathering more evidence, refining his arguments, and anticipating potential objections.
It's remarkable how much thought and consideration he put into every aspect of his work.
He even experienced moments of pure joy during this period. He described one such instance in his autobiography where the solution to a particularly challenging problem came to him suddenly while riding in his carriage. It highlights the constant churning of the scientific mind.
A true eureka moment. But just as he was preparing to finally unveil his groundbreaking theory to the world, He received a letter that would add another layer of complexity to the story.
A letter from Alfred Russel Wallace, a young naturalist working in the Malay archipelago, outlining a theory of evolution by natural selection strikingly similar to Darwin's own.
What are the chances? It's incredible to think that two individuals, working independently on opposite sides of the globe, could arrive at the same revolutionary idea.
It speaks to the power of observation, the universality of scientific principles, and perhaps a touch of serendipity. Darwin, initially hesitant about how to proceed, eventually agreed to a joint presentation of his and Wallace's ideas at the Linnean Society in 1858.
A pivotal moment in scientific history, no doubt, but the true earthquake came a year later, in 1859, with the publication of Darwin's On the Origin of Species.
A book that would forever change our understanding of the natural world, sparking intense debate and forever etching Darwin's name in the annals of scientific history. Despite the controversy surrounding his work, Darwin remained committed to his principles and the pursuit of scientific truth. He meticulously documented the responses to Origin, collecting over 265 reviews of the book.
Talk about dedication. He was truly invested in the scientific process, from meticulous observation to the reception of his work.
And what a legacy he left behind. His theory of evolution by natural selection continues to shape our understanding of the natural world, influencing fields from medicine to conservation, genetics to artificial intelligence. But it's interesting to note that in his autobiography, Darwin never explicitly connected his theories to human evolution.
It's true. He presented his findings and allowed others to grapple with the implications. So as we conclude our deep dive into Darwin's life and work, it's worth considering this. How might understanding his personal journey, his meticulous methods, and the social context of his time shape our understanding of his theory's impact, then and now? It's a question that continues to resonate as Darwin's work continues to influence scientific thought to this day.